think I know.
We're not.
Call it again.
Sound speed?
Okay, so sound speed, I'll say it one more time anyway. All right, all cameras are rolling, both 1 and 2. Does that alignment look okay on the top? Is it okay, or I feel like I'm off or something? And then this one. Does that look okay? Pretty simple.
Looks center. That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, now's the time to
Okay.
do it if you're going
All
to.
right, let's go ahead and mark it.
After Eden docuseries, The Dragonfly Home, Whitney, Melissa, take 1.
Okay, once you're cleared and settled, all quiet. All right, everybody settled? Sir?
Ladies, what, in your opinion, and you can talk freely together here, what is fueling demand for child sex trafficking?
That's big. You
Yeah.
want to go for it?
Yeah.
I can go for it.
What is fueling demand? I mean, a desire for illicit sex. That's the biggest thing, which is a big thing to say. How would you break that down?
Yeah, so I think that we see that there is this sense of entitlement or sport, that men feel entitled to have the sex that they want with who they want. And I think that that's the demand, that these individuals are property, that they are something just for their pleasure, that they're not human beings, and that they get to have that. I think that our society overall fuels this. The more and more that women are seen as just sexual objects, I think that people buy into that. And so I think our whole society kind of feeds into this notion that young girls or young boys can be just sex objects.
It's a devaluation
Yeah.
of people. It's like she was talking about with the entitlement that this should be available for someone. This is something that should be easy to access, and you certainly see a movement toward making it easier and easier to access through apps, online services. Just like with any product that you would want to sell, right? There's a move toward making that the easiest thing, and people think that should be the case. What else also interesting is that you see some sex purchasers who they may have a wife, they may have children whom they truly love, and yet somehow there's this ability to compartmentalize. And these individuals over here who should be available for their sexual gratification, somehow there's this ability to not see them as having the same value as this person's own family members.
This may not be your field of expertise, but I would like to get your opinion on this. The fact that this is happening online through apps, social media platforms, but then we obviously have laws to where we don't want to censor speech in this country, and we all want free speech, and that's a very, very tough subject. You don't want to censor free speech, but now it's being abused, particularly with minors. Just your opinion on what that looks like and what can be done, your thoughts of how to stem the tide.
So if you look at the case law surrounding the First Amendment, free speech, there has been some censorship, and while it is definitely a value in this country to not censor the content of what someone says, there are laws in place. For example, take hate speech. You know, if something is harming someone, then there are laws that do govern that form of speech. Speech that could incite violence, there are laws against that. You can't say whatever you want. We try to really, because we do value liberty, and the First Amendment is so huge and it's ingrained in our culture, but there have been some safeguards against speech that can harm people. I don't know that there's anything in place for that right now. That's a sticky subject. In fact, you know, Supreme Court cases surrounding pornography, you know, there is of course, I can't remember his name now, but the justice who said, I don't know it, I can't define pornography, or I can't define, sorry, what's the word? It is, now I can't, it's out of my head.
I knew where you were going.
Yeah,
with
what's that word? You know what the word is?
No.
It was a pornography case. So I'll just go with it. Anyway. So the Supreme Court justice who said, like, I can't define maybe what is illicit and like sexually illicit, but I know it when I see it. So there's so many varying points of view about this subject. It's just such a balancing test legally. The value of free speech versus protecting people. And that's something that's constantly evolving. Does this answer your question?
Whitney, what's your thoughts about what's happening online?
Yeah, well, I can say that most of the people that we serve are either groomed or sold online or both. And so while it is tenuous, I think that we do value liberty. And so if we value liberty, then we have to value the liberty of these young children who are being sold every single day in the United States of America. And so I think that we have to make that hard stand and say, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong here. And say that it's not okay for our children to be sold and that should not be protected in any country in the world, especially the United States of America.
Do you have any idea, either of you or both, on what the profit looks like for a trafficker from a child? A pimp. What are they benefiting financially?
Yeah, so I think that varies pretty widely from what we've seen with the individuals that we serve, but we have seen or heard, and this is all from survivors that we serve, that oftentimes children are priced higher per hour than adults because there is this demand for children. And the trafficker is essentially taking a little bit more of a risk in selling a child. And so we've seen as high as $500,000 an hour for a child, or I don't want to speak to that because that's identifying. I'm sorry, I'm trying to censor out some of the identifying information too. So it's highly profitable, and so we have to think about trafficking as a business. The trafficker is investing essentially not very much, maybe like a hamburger from McDonald's to feed the child, maybe some clothing, and then essentially they're making $500 an hour, right? And that child doesn't get days off. They don't get holidays off or weekends off. They're working around the clock every single day, grueling work, having sex with multiple men a day. And so that's just money stacking up. There's a low investment, there's low risk, and so it's this, I hate to say it's a magnificent business model. It's a magnificent business model in a very sick way. It's very profitable.
Is this a crime that's happening in red light districts? Is there a socioeconomic class that's being profiled? Is it in the neighborhoods? Is it on college campuses? Your opinion, where is this happening?
It's happening everywhere.
Absolutely, yeah. So to us, this is a crime that absolutely does not discriminate. I certainly had my preconceptions, I think, before I started serving survivors. So I thought, no, it couldn't affect this affluent neighborhood in a suburb of Oklahoma City. It couldn't affect them because they're well-resourced, right? But what we saw was this is a crime that absolutely affects, like, the young woman who has loving parents, but her parents are working all the time, and so she's at home alone on the internet looking for validation and attention, and she's finding people who want to take advantage of that. And so it affects her just like it affects the young woman in Oklahoma who grows up in poverty, who doesn't finish high school, who gets pregnant as a teen. It affects her as well. And it affects the boy who comes out to his parents as gay, and he's kicked out of his house, and he has nobody to support him, and he has to make his way on the streets as a homeless teen, and so maybe he's approached by a trafficker as well. And so it affects all of these different people. I would say that populations who are already marginalized, who have their rights taken away, who are being discriminated against, they're also being taken advantage of. And I would say that they're being taken advantage of more. And I also would say that it's even It's already brave, but it's even more brave for them to come to us and trust us and ask for help.
Something unique to you, have you experienced much interaction with Native American reservations? And you have some in Oklahoma. Do you see some of these victims come from the reservation? Just what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so I'm actually Native myself, and we don't have reservations in Oklahoma, but we have kind of this weird territory of different tribes occupying spaces. And so what we typically see is that a lot of times young Native girls, maybe they've experienced a lot of trauma, and that can be abuse in so many different ways. So there's this generational trauma that can happen, and people absolutely take advantage of that. And so traffickers often work with young girls, and they promise them this dream of a different life. They promise them that they'll take care of them, that they'll love them, that, they'll get to have these different tangible things. And at the end of the day, it's really a dream of being sold into the life of prostitution or exploitation. And so we see that essentially non-Native Americans are exploiting Native American girls and boys and selling them for sex in Oklahoma City, in Tulsa, for their profit.
Both of you, maybe just your opinion on what can the general public do just to be more aware? What are some of the things that you can give them that they can look out for at a truck stop, at a gas station? You know,
Well, what's so interesting about the red flags of human trafficking is that it's generally, you need a collection of identifiers, because it could be the person who is, maybe you have a young woman who's walking with a guy, and maybe you just kind of get a feeling he seems a little more controlling than usual. That can be hard to identify, because that could just be somebody walking with her brother or boyfriend, but that could be one indicator. You might take a look at how they're dressed if it's really cold, and maybe they don't have a lot of clothes on. If they kind of look tired, sort of malnourished. But it's taking the collection of these red flags. Anything?
Yeah, and I would say just as we receive hotline calls from the community, but also frontline responders, so often people call us and they say something just felt off. Right. About the situation. So there's just this thing in their gut that something is just not right. And I'm not saying that that's always trafficking, but that's so often what the start of a hotline call may look like for somebody who's trying to refer somebody who needs help. And so it's all of these different things. It's this gathering information in this context, but I would say that you really nailed those. I would say also the anxiety or signs of abuse or torture, whether that be bruises, cigarette burns, sometimes branding tattoos, things like that, can be so many different things. It can look so many different ways.
if you don't mind, do you mind sharing that hotline with us, the number, and also your website?
Yeah.
And some detail on your gala.
Yeah. So our website is www.thedragonflyhome.org, and our 24-hour human trafficking helpline is 405-212-3377, or toll free 855-674-4767. And we're about to have our 4th annual Crown of Beauty Gala. Can't believe that it has been, that we've done 4 of them already. This year it is on Thursday, October 11th.
October 3rd.
October 3rd. Last year, I'll start that over again. This year, it is on Thursday, October 3rd, and that is going to be in Oklahoma City at our historic public farmers market.
Yeah,
what
and
else?
so the inspiration behind that, if anybody's interested, the Crown of Beauty was, I think the Lord kind of gave us that through Isaiah 61, the crown of beauty for ashes. And so we saw that the people that we serve, they've come through so much hardship and pain and suffering, but that there is a possibility of something different for them, that there is hope, that there is healing, restoration, transformation, and that they have value. And I want for everybody that we serve to know that they have value and that we value them and we believe in them. And so that's the whole kind of inspiration behind the gala.
Yeah, that scripture says that God will take our ashes, which can be all these things that Whitney's describing. He'll take our ashes and replace those with a crown of beauty.
That's beautiful. Ladies, one last question. So often we encounter a lot of these organizations were founded by former victims. Are you seeing that maybe some of your staff, you personally have had some of these traumatic experiences? Do you see that being a case where some of these victims want to go help once they are healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see pretty frequently that the people we serve, one of their aspirations or their goals on their service plan is that they want to help other people, that they know people who are still trapped in trafficking and that they want to go help them, that they want to be advocates someday. One of the young women that we help right now, she tells us all the time, she's like, I want to run a Dragonfly Home. I want to run my own Dragonfly Home. And to me, that's pretty incredible, and it speaks to the heart of the people that we serve, that they've recovered from something hard and they still want to give back. Like, that's amazing.
Why Dragonfly?
Oh,
Go ahead.
it's very specific. So when we were founding and trying to settle on a name, we specifically did research really looking at the characteristics of the people who we serve. Mm-hmm. So the human trafficking survivors they just demonstrate incredible strength and resilience. And so we were actually just Googling things that symbolize things like strength and resilience and hope. And the dragonfly came up. Mm-hmm. And what really stood out to us about the dragonfly is that not only does the dragonfly represent what we already see in the people we serve, but it represents what we would want for them. So it uniquely represents transformation, specifically transformation that comes from determining one's own course. So when we learned all that, we knew that was a symbol for us.
Thank you, lady.
I had,
What? Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to readdress the financial restitution? No,
Yes, Whitney, if you don't mind, can you answer that question for me? Do you see that some of these victims, is there access to financial restitution, and do they end up getting it?
yes, so I would say that we are pretty blessed with the partners that we have in our community, with local DAs and federal prosecutors who are willing to fight for these people. And we have been involved in cases where individuals receive or are awarded financial restitution. And so we have to sit as advocates and say, I mean, how do you provide restitution for what they've been through? So we're thinking about the dental, and we're thinking about the medical and the therapy and the transportation and all of those things. But for young women who aren't able to have children because of what they've been through, how do you put a price tag on that, right? And so we've definitely been a part of that, and we see the value in that. And I think that survivors are more apt to be able to access those things if they are provided the emotional support that they require. I mean, going to court is scary anyways, right? Cooperating with law enforcement, with prosecutors is scary. But when their basic needs are being met and they have people who are willing to walk alongside them and help them understand how the courtroom works and how the process works, that's where we've seen the most success.
Do you see any delineation, or does it even matter? Does race play a part in this from a victim standpoint? Do you see all races represented? Is there a particular race you see more profiled in Oklahoma?
So we've absolutely seen every race represented. Again, I just think that people who are already marginalized in society, who are already discriminated against, are more vulnerable to the crime of trafficking. But we really do see people of all different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, everything. All of these people being brutalized in this way.
Crystal, is there one I definitely
Did you have something you wanted to say?
I
Yeah.
don't know, I think the answers kind of cover the ones that weren't directly
Yeah,
asked.
yeah,
I think they've done a really good job at that.
I have one thing. I think we both misspoke. And maybe you all can advise us. So our shelter will be essentially for adult women who are survivors of this crime and their children. But in the case that we have like a trans person or whatever, we would also accommodate that. And so if I could,
So let me repose the question.
yeah,
What do you call the shelter again?
we'll call it the Dragonfly Home.
The Dragonfly Home?
And it will be, I mean, what do we settle on? Sex trafficking shelter?
Sex
Okay,
trafficking
all right,
shelter.
So let me pose that question.
Do you want to answer it? Adult survivors and their
You're
children.
looking to open
Just
a
adult
shelter
survivors.
this year. Can you tell us more about that shelter that will provide more permanent services?
Yeah, so the Dragonfly Home Sex Trafficking Shelter will provide 24-hour care for survivors of sex trafficking and also their children. One more about that? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So survivors in this environment, they'll have a safe place to stay with advocates there around the clock. We're talking meals, we're talking access to, laundry and utilities, and but really a sense of community with people who've been through not the same experience, but similar experiences, and just a place to settle down and heal after the hardship that they've been through. And I think the really cool thing about our model is we're going to have the Human Trafficking Relief and Restoration Center and the shelter. And so as these individuals kind of move on from the emergency shelter, they'll have this safe place to go to keep accessing services. Because what we've seen over time is that survivors, like 30 days or 6 months or even a year in an emergency shelter is still not enough. Like, you still need support to go on. And so we're happy to be able to provide that in all of our services.
A couple of real quick questions and quick answers on this. Are you seeing people re-traffic?
100%, yeah. So we see generational trafficking. We see people who are being re-trafficked by multiple perpetrators. So that's the short answer.
And we're
Yeah.
going to rapid fire some of these.
Yeah.
How many beds will your shelter have? How many individuals and their family could you serve?
Yes, so we want to have 6 beds. We've seen that the people that we serve, and this is our own philosophy, thrive in this home environment, and not necessarily that like this massive institution where they're a number, but like a family, like in a healthy home setting, to be able to recover in that way with just a few individuals.
Do you have an estimate of the cost per person per month to go through this? Because of course they're getting services, rehabilitation, counseling, etc.
I think
Yes.
at the center it was $2,500
Yeah.
per person. And for shelter, have you worked that out?
No, I have not worked it out for shelter. We don't have it.
Be broad and just say that it's in the thousands.
Yeah, okay.
So just go ahead and give me an
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
So to help somebody for 1 month at our crisis center is about $2,500 per person per month. Shelter setting is going to be more than that because of the around-the-clock care. So,
In the thousands.
an estimate right now, definitely thousands of dollars.
How many of those kind of beds are there in Oklahoma today?
Yeah. I actually don't know the number.
Right.
There are
Not
2
many.
shelters in the Tulsa area that have a handful of beds. And so I would say that in Oklahoma, often beds that are available are full, right? And so we absolutely have a need for more beds in Oklahoma for adults and children.
Okay. Cut, cut.
That's so hard to answer things
I
quickly.
know. No, you did.
Oh, no.
Good job, ladies.